Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation, perhaps trying to translate a very specific feeling or like a unique cultural concept from your native language into English, and you just hit an absolute brick wall?
Oh, yeah. All the time. It's so frustrating.
Right, you are standing there, you're searching your brain, and you realize the word simply does not exist. It totally begs the question, is it actually possible that some things just cannot be translated?
It's a huge question,
Hmm.
and it's something every language learner faces eventually.
Exactly. So today's deep dive pulls from Roman Jakobson's classic linguistic theories and Elizaveta Alamova's modern translation data to find out exactly how professionals bridge these seemingly impossible gaps.
It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, we're going to explore the mechanics of, well, untranslatability and the strategic toolbox used by cultural mediators. So, okay, let's unpack this because linguists actually have a formal term for this missing word phenomenon, don't they?
They do, yeah. In Elizaveta Alamova's thesis, and, throughout the whole field of linguistics, it is referred to as a lacuna, or plural, lacuna.
Lacuna. That
Yeah.
sounds very fancy.
It's actually from Latin. It means a pool or a pit.
Yeah.
But in our context, we usually just call it a lexical gap. It essentially describes a structural discrepancy between the vocabularies of two different languages.
Got it. So if we think of language as like a map of human experience, a lexical gap would be a spot where one language's map features this highly detailed, beautifully rendered forest, but the other language's map just shows a complete blank space.
Total blank space, yes.
Like one culture decided a concept was important enough to give it a dedicated label, and another culture simply didn't map it out at all. A word hole.
I love that. A word hole.
Huh.
That map analogy is a highly effective way to visualize it. But we have to look at how linguistic theory actually addresses those blank spaces. Because it's not as simple as just saying, oh, well, we can't translate it.
Right, because translators still have a job to do.
Exactly. And this is where Roman Jakobson comes in. He's this towering figure in structural linguistics, and he argued vehemently against what he called the dogma of untranslatability.
Wait, really? So he didn't believe things were untranslatable?
Not at all. He did not believe that a blank space on a lexical map meant a concept was impossible to communicate. Jacobson famously claimed that all cognitive experience can be conveyed in any existing language.
Wow. Okay, so he rejected the idea of absolute untranslatability completely. Like, even if you lack the single perfect word, you can still somehow get the point across.
He did, yeah. And to demonstrate this, Jacobson pointed to a structural discrepancy that seems incredibly mundane, but it, perfectly illustrates the mechanism. The English word cheese.
Cheese. Like just regular cheese.
Just regular cheese. Standard Russian, it turns out, does not possess a single, all-encompassing equivalent for the broad English concept of cheese.
Wait, they don't have a word for cheese. How do they order pizza?
Well, they do, but it's specific. The Russian word sir is often used as a translation, but sir specifically and exclusively refers to fermented pressed curds.
Oh, I see. Meaning it completely excludes something like cottage cheese, which is unfermented.
Precisely. If a Russian speaker wants to talk about cottage cheese, they use an entirely distinct non-overlapping concept, which is turog.
Okay, so the English map draws one giant border around all of these dairy products and just calls it all cheese.
Right.
But the Russian map draws two completely separate, smaller borders.
That's exactly it. And Jakobson's argument is that a Russian speaker can still perfectly understand and communicate the concept of English cheese, even without a single corresponding code unit for it. They just use descriptive phrases.
Like they would describe the category.
Yeah, they might say food made of pressed curds encompassing both fermented and unfermented varieties, so the cognitive experience remains entirely communicable.
Okay, I mean, I understand the theory there. But in practice, that feels like it totally ignores the cognitive load of a normal conversation.
How do you mean?
Well, if we rely on a long, clunky description to explain a single, elegant word, the pacing is totally destroyed. Like saying, I am eating a food made of unfermented pressed curds instead of just, I'm eating cottage cheese, that completely changes the rhythm of the interaction.
Oh, absolutely. It's a mouthful.
Right. It is a bit like having to explain the mechanics of a joke before you actually deliver the punchline. Like, sure, the literal meaning survives, but the original magic or the impact is completely lost.
This raises an important question, actually, because you have zeroed in on the exact tension that professional translators navigate constantly. Jakobson proves that we can technically explain anything, just by increasing the word count.
Right. Just use more words.
But a technical explanation is not a seamless reading experience. When you disrupt the rhythm of a text to over-explain something, you completely alter the reader's immersion.
Yeah, you pull them right out of the story.
Exactly. And that brings us to a hurdle that goes far, far beyond just grammatical structures or vocabulary lists. The ultimate challenge in translation really is culture.
Culture. Because words are not just like isolated data points floating in a vacuum.
No, not at all.
They carry the heavy weight of the environment they were born in.
They really do, which introduces this vital concept in translation studies known as realia.
Realia, like real things.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
While Jakobson's theory holds up fine for physical objective realities like cheese translators encounter massive friction when dealing with realia. These are objects, customs, or concepts that are completely unique to and deeply embedded within one specific cultural universe.
Okay, so they carry a heavy load of like local reality, history, and social behavior that resists a simple dictionary description.
Exactly.
The sources actually offer some brilliant examples of this. Take the Arabic word tarab. A bilingual dictionary might offer a rough approximation, but English simply does not possess a singular word for this concept.
Right. Tarab is a huge one.
Yeah, it describes a very specific state of musical ecstasy and emotional rapture. It is that feeling of having the music completely take over your soul.
And you can see how relying on a simple descriptive phrase, or even a near synonym, falls incredibly short there. If a translator just reduces tarab to the English word entertainment or enjoyment,
Oh, it's terrible.
it is. They strip away the entire cultural weight and the profound psychological depth of the original Arabic term.
It effectively replaces this complex, multisensory, transcendent experience with a very flat, generic label. Like, he enjoyed the song, it's just not the same.
Not even close.
Another really compelling example from the research is the Arabic concept of gaira. It translates loosely to a specific type of protective honor or jealousy regarding one's family.
Yeah, that's a tricky one to mediate.
Because the English word jealousy is heavily burdened with negative, toxic connotations, right? Whereas gaira carries a sense of noble protectiveness and duty. You can't just swap them.
You really can't. And realia also encompasses tangible, everyday items, too, like a Scottish kilt or a British mince pie are classic examples of realia.
Wait, a mince pie, isn't that just a pastry?
See, that's exactly the issue. They aren't just a skirt or a pastry. They evoke specific holidays, social structures, and historical identities. A mince pie means Christmas in Britain. It means winter and family.
Oh, I see. So if you just translate it as fruit pastry, the reader misses all of that cozy holiday feeling.
Exactly. So the translator is not just acting as a human dictionary. The academic literature stresses that translators actually act as cultural mediators. Their primary objective is managing what linguists call the pragmatic impact of a text.
Okay, let's unpack pragmatic impact a bit, because it sounds like it goes beyond just defining the word. It's about managing the psychological reaction of the audience, right?
It's spot on.
Ensuring that the target reader feels the exact same emotional resonance, the same cultural familiarity, or maybe intentional shock that the original reader experienced.
That is a perfect summary of the mechanism. Pragmatic impact focuses on the effect of the language in its context of use. The translator wants the English reader to react to the translated text with the same cognitive and emotional response that, say, the Arabic or Russian reader had to the original text.
Which sets up an incredibly difficult task. I mean, we have these blank spaces on the map, these lexical gaps, combined with culturally heavy realia like tarab. How does a professional translator actually mediate that culture on the page?
It's a high-wire act.
When they are staring at a sentence they know won't translate directly, what tools do they deploy? Like, how do they fix the map?
Well, they rely on a very strategic, highly refined toolbox. Elizaveta Alimova's corpus-based study, where she analyzed thousands of translated film subtitles, provides amazing empirical data on how these tools are utilized under real pressure.
Oh, film subtitles. That's got to be tough.
Very tough. And the most prevalent strategy she observed, particularly in subtitling, is known as generalization.
Generalization meaning they intentionally move up the hierarchy of meaning to a broader category.
Yes. They substitute the highly specific untranslatable word with a simpler, more generic term. For instance, think about the English word toddler.
Okay, toddler.
There's very specific parameters, right? It denotes a child who has just begun to walk, usually between the ages of 1 and 3, characterized by a sort of clumsy gait They toddle.
Right, they waddle around.
Exactly. Well, Spanish lacks a single lexical item with those exact semantic boundaries. So a translator might generalize toddler to niño, which broadly just means child.
Alamova's thesis also notes the translation of general practitioner, or GP, into simply the word for doctor in Spanish or Russian translations, right?
Yes, that's another great example.
It strips away the specific cultural role of the British healthcare system to offer a universally understood category.
It does. Now, earlier you pointed out the danger of losing flavor when we broaden definitions, like with the joke punchline.
Right. Generalization absolutely feels like it results in a loss of semantic detail. I mean, the clumsy, waddling mental image of a toddler is totally lost when you just generalize it to child. Isn't that just dumbing it down?
It is a loss, yes. But we must consider the medium. Alamova's research focused on film subtitles, which introduces extreme cognitive and spatial constraints.
Oh, right. The character limits on the screen and the literal speed of the scene. The viewer is trying to process visual information, audio cues, and read text all simultaneously.
Exactly. The human brain can only process so much information at once. If a translator uses a long, highly accurate descriptive phrase to explain what a general practitioner is, the viewer will be forced to read a whole paragraph while missing the visual action of the film.
The cognitive load becomes way too heavy.
Right. So generalization is a calculated trade-off. The translator willingly sacrifices granular semantic detail to preserve the pacing and keep the viewer immersed in the narrative flow.
That makes perfect sense for a visual medium like TV or movies. But if pacing and character limits are not the primary constraint, say, in a dense literary novel where the reader sets their own pace, generalization seems like it would just flatten the prose way too much.
And it would. Which is why in a medium like a novel, where the reader has time to absorb nuance, translators often pivot to the second tool, descriptive equivalence. This brings us right back to Jakobson's theory of using more words to explain the gap.
So in the case of our Arabic word tarab, instead of generalizing it to he felt entertained, the translator leverages the freedom of the page to write out the full cultural context.
Exactly.
They might translate it as he was swept into that unique state of musical ecstasy and emotional rapture known as tarab.
They basically sketch out the missing part of the map right there in the text. Descriptive equivalence prioritizes absolute semantic and cultural fidelity. It honors the origin of the word and preserves its exact psychological reality.
But, as we suspected earlier, it does alter the narrative rhythm. It deliberately slows the reader down, inviting them to step outside the flow of the story to learn about a new cultural concept.
Yes, this really highlights how translation is a constant, ongoing negotiation. If you use generalization, you lose the cultural weight. If you use descriptive equivalence, you lose the narrative momentum.
There has to be a strategy for when a translator wants to preserve both the pacing and the emotional weight of a cultural concept, like a middle ground.
There is, and it requires a significant amount of creative license. The third major strategy is adaptation.
Adaptation.
Yes, adaptation abandons the pursuit of literal meaning entirely. Instead, the translator searches for a cultural equivalent. They are attempting to recreate the exact pragmatic impact by substituting the original culture's realia with something familiar from the target culture.
Oh, I love this. The sources provide a really clarifying example of this regarding academic system.
The exams, right?
Yeah. If a French novel features a teenager experiencing severe, agonizing anxiety because they are preparing for the baccalaureate, which is the highly rigorous national academic qualification in France, a literal translation like the test completely fails.
The test is a generalization, and you're right, it fails because a test could be a minor weekly spelling quiz. It doesn't communicate the intense, life-altering stakes of the baccalaureate. The pragmatic impact is just gone.
Right. So a translator employing adaptation might substitute the baccalaureate with the British A-levels or maybe the German Abitur, depending on who the target audience is.
Exactly.
I find that strategy so fascinating because it maps the original emotion perfectly onto the reader's existing experiences. By changing the literal fact of the French exam to a British exam, the translator ensures the British reader immediately feels that familiar knot of anxiety, the sweaty palms of a major high school milestone.
Right, you alter the literal reality to preserve the emotional truth. It requires deep cultural fluency on the part of the translator. The academic papers highlight a stunning example of creative adaptation by the translator Patrick Cree in his English translation of Claudio Magris's Italian book Dandubio.
Oh, this is a great one.
In the original Italian text, there is a metaphor that translates literally to a mine of hatred. referencing like an underground explosive mine.
Right, and a mine of hatred works literally, but to a modern English reader, it sounds a little archaic or perhaps just slightly disconnected.
It just doesn't carry the immediate, visceral threat that Magris intended. So Cree adapted the metaphor, translating it as a time bomb of hatred.
That immediately changes the psychological reaction. A time bomb implies a ticking clock, an inevitable, suspenseful explosion. It's vastly more vivid.
The author of the linguistic paper refers to this specific type of adaptation as an approfondissement, which means a deepening. The translator went beneath the surface-level vocabulary to grasp the author's underlying intent, which was suspense and latent danger, and adapted the metaphor to deliver a much sharper, more immediate pragmatic impact to the English reader.
That level of intervention is practically a form of artistry, but it makes me wonder about the limits of adaptation.
What do you mean?
Well, what happens when a translator encounters structural wordplay? If an author relies on a highly specific phonetic pun or a rhyming joke where two words sound identical in Spanish but have completely different phonetic roots in English.
Ah, yes, the dreaded pun.
Right. You can't generalize it, you can't describe it without completely ruining the joke, and a cultural equivalent might not fit the context of the specific scene at all. What is the protocol for untranslatable structure?
That scenario demands the most complex tool in the translator's repertoire, compensation.
Compensation.
When a linguistic feature, like a pun, a specific rhythm, or a stylistic flourish, is fundamentally impossible to recreate in its original location, the translator must just accept the loss in that specific sentence.
They just let it go.
In that sentence, yes. But they don't simply abandon the stylistic weight of the text overall. They compensate for it elsewhere.
Oh, to return to our earlier analogy, if a city planner has to bulldoze a historic landmark on one side of town to build a necessary highway, they zone a new historic park on the completely opposite side of town. The location changes, but the city's overall character and value remain balanced.
That is the exact mechanism of compensation. The translator maps the overall stylistic capital of the text. If they're forced to flatten a brilliant piece of Spanish wordplay into a standard, humorless English sentence in, say, paragraph 2, they will actively insert a brand new English pun, idiom, or alliteration into paragraph 4.
Wait, really? Even if paragraph 4 didn't originally contain a joke in the Spanish text?
Correct. The goal of compensation is to ensure that by the time the reader finishes the chapter, they have experienced the same density of humor, the same richness of poetic tone as the reader of the original text. The specific moments of brilliance might occur on different pages, but the overarching tone of the work remains faithful to the author's voice.
That realization fundamentally shifts how one reads translated literature or watches subtitled films. I mean, the translator is performing this invisible high-wire balancing act constantly.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Right. They're constantly cycling through generalization to manage the cognitive load and pacing, utilizing descriptive equivalence to honor cultural depth when time permits, deploying adaptation to land the emotional punch, and calculating compensation to maintain the overarching stylistic architecture of the book.
It is a staggering cognitive task. The translator is simultaneously holding two entirely distinct conceptual and cultural universes in their mind, constantly measuring the pragmatic impact of every single lexical choice against the constraints of the medium.
Synthesizing everything we have explored today from Jakobson and Alamova, it becomes so clear that these lexical gaps, these lacunae, are not terrifying voids where communication just dies.
Not at all.
They are catalysts for linguistic creativity. Translators are not just human algorithms swapping code. They are the architects of cultural empathy, constantly innovating to make the nuances of the world accessible across borders.
They are the bridge builders. Without their strategic mediation, we would be entirely isolated within our own linguistic boundaries, unable to access the broader spectrum of human experience.
So what does this all mean for you? For the language learners listening to this deep dive, the actionable takeaway here is a shift in perspective. When you hit that inevitable brick wall, when you realize your vocabulary has a blank space on the map and you cannot find the perfect English word for your native feeling, recognize that you haven't failed.
Exactly. You haven't failed at all.
You have simply discovered a lexical gap. It is an opportunity to act as your own cultural mediator. You can choose to generalize for the sake of the conversation's flow. You can take the time to offer a descriptive equivalence to teach your conversational partner something new, or you can search for a cultural adaptation to share the emotional weight. Do not fear the blank spaces.
I love that. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, We are reminded that our internal lives are vastly more complex than any single dictionary can capture. And this actually leads to one final, highly provocative theory from Roman Jakobson that challenges the very boundaries of communication.
Oh, everything we have discussed so far has been focused on translating verbal language into other verbal languages. Did Jacobson explore something beyond that?
He did. Jacobson categorized translation into three types. We have been discussing the first two, but his third category is what he termed intersemiotic translation.
Intersemiotic, translating between different systems of signs.
Precisely. It is the translation from a verbal language system into a completely non-verbal system of signs. It challenges the assumption that words are the ultimate or final destination for our cognitive experiences.
Wait, so we are talking about translating a verbal concept into a completely different medium, like taking a novel and translating it into a ballet, or taking a complex poem and translating its pragmatic impact into a piece of instrumental music.
Exactly that. Or translating a profound, untranslatable feeling directly into a painting. It pushes the boundaries of how we mediate experience entirely.
That is an incredible framework to process the world through. If we think back to that complex Arabic Realia we discussed earlier, tarab, the state of musical ecstasy, we established how difficult it is to capture its essence using English vocabulary without flattening it through generalization.
Right, it's almost impossible in words.
But Jacobson's theory of intersemiotic translation suggests that tarab might be perfectly, flawlessly translated into a brushstroke on a canvas or a specific progression of chords on a piano.
It raises a profound question about how we navigate our own internal lacunae. It challenges us to consider how much of our daily lives, how many of those complex, deeply layered emotions where we consistently hit a verbal brick wall might actually be more accurately translated into art or action or music rather than into language.
That is something to sit with. The next time you find yourself staring at a blank space on your linguistic map, unable to find the words to communicate your reality, perhaps the most accurate translation isn't a word at all.